Oh, please. Yeah. With us on this morning of the Grey Cup for the Football Reporters of Canada annual breakfast and Hall of Fame inductions. My name is Derek Taylor from CGOB in Winnipeg. That's why I love Glenn Suter. Starts the applause. I've been asked a zillion times in radio interviews this week, why is Grey Cup so special to you? And I don't know if it's the same for you, but I just like the thought of figuratively stripping down and letting Rod Smith's voice just wash over me for 3.5 hours. It's so good. I really should have done this in private. Anyway, so that's sorry, Rod. But yes, Suits, I look forward to people talking about how you hate the Riders for some reason in the game they're not in. That's also another one. We are here to honor two people who are very special to me in my love for the CFL. Farhan Lalji, I will listen to everything he says about football, except when he calls me at 10 p.m. on the way back across the border to tell me how much running backs are super important.
I don't say that anymore.
Come around to the dark side. And Steve Daniel, who I finally met in person yesterday after, hands up if you have on deadline, frantically emailed Steve Daniel going, in the last 50 years, how many people have, yeah. The man who has the answers to everything. And I'm constantly in search for the answers to stuff. And Steve is just that next level. So, Steve, it means so much to have met you in person. And we, as we talked about, we kind of share a brain about trying to just find the answers to all these questions. So super excited to be here for this. None of this is possible without the gang from TSN, who are a big part of sponsoring, this breakfast, the Hall's media wing on the 7th floor of Tim Hortons Field, the hospitality suite, which I'm going to assume was, Jamie and I, was it in fact bumping? Was it bumping? Timmy? Yeah, it was all right. Okay. It was all right. Wordsmith from the Ottawa Sun. Allow us to vote on player awards as well, and then harangue each other for voting on player awards, and establish media policy with the CFL, which is a very big deal. So I'd like to thank Sean Redmond, the VP and GM of Bell Media Sports. Where's Sean? Thank you, Sean. We appreciate it very much. If I could, I would love to call on the Commissioner of the CFL, Randy Ambrosie, to bring some greetings.
Well, good morning, everyone. A couple things. When Farhan talks, does he do that? When he talks about running backs? Because that's super cool. For those of you who were at Paul Graham's event on Tuesday night, I'm going to follow a similar model. So I'm going to start when I was 3 years old, and then I'll work my way up to today. Listen, it's 55 or 60 minutes, a little slow to start, but it'll pick up like crazy about the middle. Look, I unfortunately, as you all know, can't stay very long, but it's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to be here and spend some time with all of you. I want to start by saying to Farhan, these are very handy, by the way, after a late Saturday, to Farhan, it's been a remarkable 7.5 years working with you, and you do an enormous job, covering our league. Can't thank you enough for your professionalism and thoughtfulness, and you help tell our story in quite a remarkable way. So to you and your family, thanks for everything you do for the Canadian Football League, and I'll look forward to seeing you inducted into the Hall of Fame later this year. And then, of course, Steve Daniel, we had to the reason they did the pictures wasn't so much for Farhan, because if we see Farhan on the news all the time, it's for Steve, because we kind of rarely let Steve out of his cubicle. And look, he's just one of those massively unsung heroes. Steve's been working at his craft for a very long time. And it doesn't take you more than a few minutes when you talk to Steve to realize just how much pride he takes in the work that he does, how much effort he makes to ensure that our story gets told the right way. And I think one of the things that emerged over these past several years with Steve is he's an innovator. He's always looking to how do we improve the way we tell the story? What's that next nugget of fact? What's that next piece of information that's going to help to explain just how great our game really is? And I think both Farhan and Steve help to tell the fun, fast, and entertaining story in a remarkable way. And to both of them, and frankly to all of you, thank you for everything you do to make our story come alive, day in and day out, week in and week out. I've said several times over the past 7.5 years, I think this fun, fast, and entertaining football that we bring to the world is special. And I would stand by this. I don't think you need to be biggest to be the best. I think we are the funnest, fastest, most entertaining brand of football in the world. I think it's time to put aside any notion that we'd have to be different in order to be great. I think we're already great. And a part of that story is the people in this room that tell the story. And to all of you, thank you very much. It's been the honor of my lifetime to work in the Canadian Football League, to be part of the Canadian Football League family, and to have had a chance to know all of you. So thank you very much. Enjoy the day. 38-38, and then whoever the hell wants to win at that point, it's theirs. But let's hope for a great game and another great chapter in the Canadian football story. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Steve, it's coming up in my speech in about a minute. When's the last time the Bombers beat the Argos by more than 9? Last night. Perfect. All right. If I could, I would like to call up the president of the Football Reporters of Canada, Mr. Jeff Hamilton.
Thank you, DT. Testing. About half of my jokes have already been told, but the good news is they seem to hit, so I'll say them again. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. As it's been a hectic week and a particularly busy day today with the difference out west, so I appreciate everybody adjusting on the fly and being here for what is a very, very special morning. As DT mentioned, my name is Jeff Hamilton. I've had the honor of being the president of the Football Reporters of Canada since the 2018 season. I want to thank Darrin Bauming right in front of me here for setting up the live stream of the event for all those people back home who want to take it in. I'm sure the tens of people out there are going to be loving this. 200, never mind. Here we go. We've upgraded to dozens, guys. That's a testament to this dinner, and particularly TSN for dolling it up. Speaking of, I'd like to thank the TSN family for your continued support of both the CFL and, of course, the Football Reporters of Canada. I took this line directly out of last year's speech, but it really is hard to imagine where the CFL would be without the tireless work of your staff to showcase what many of us know to be true, that the CFL is the best game in the world. A special acknowledgement goes out to TSN's Paul Graham, a true giant in the Canadian sports TV, if there ever was one. Thank you so much for your time and dedication. From what I understand, you told people in eloquently slow words earlier this week about the impact you have on this league and everything in between, and I just wish I was there. I just got bits and pieces of the text messages that I wasn't a part of, but was third party to, and I think that that was all love for you. That was all love for you, Paul. Your time and dedication to the CFL, to the World Juniors and the NHL and everything else has helped improve the experience for viewers across this country and beyond. So thank you very much. I know it's a retirement. I have a hard time thinking you're going to be going away quickly. I hear there's a big job open at the CFL right now. I don't know if you know it, but I'm sure you love yourself more than that. On an unrelated note, thanks again to Randy Ambrosie for being here. While we might be the ones holding your feet to the fire on important issues facing the league, no one can deny your passion and desire to improve the game. Randy is leaving after more than 7 years at the job, and that is a long time to appease a group of men and women who all want their own way in this league. And there's always 9 different voices and even more than that. And so, Randy, I think you deserve a ton of credit. There's no doubt this league is in a better spot than when you arrived. And while your legacy will differ from person to person, as is the case for all of us, you deserve a ton of credit for navigating through a global health crisis. So I want to thank you so much for your tireless work throughout your time as commissioner. So let's give another hand to Randy. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the rest of my colleagues, both here in Vancouver and those who are back home. From print to radio, audio to TV and online, who have gone above and beyond with their stories to shine a light on the great people who make up the CFL. There's no secret, while it's an exciting game, the players that make up this game are the reason why people come back every year to cover it. It's the reason why the league is what it is. And so and this is the week that I think, I've said this before, it's the week where we really get to see all that flexing, if you will, all that talent that is in our industry, whether it's on print, whether it's through TV, whether it's radio, everybody gets together. And it's just this cycle of who can outdo each other with work, but who can also outdo each other with play. And it just becomes this awesome week that is Grey Cup week. And it's such a pleasure to have been a part of that for so many years now. I want to thank the BC Lions and the city of Vancouver for setting the bar when it comes to putting on a Grey Cup. There was a lot of hype for Amar Doman back Grey Cup week, and it's safe to say that not only were those reached but exceeded expectations. You can't put on such a massive event without the sweat of hundreds of volunteers, so I thank them too. They're all over the place. If you see a volunteer, just go up to them and thank them. This isn't one of those things where they get paid or they get even easy instructions. They're usually working on the fly, and so a ton of credit to the volunteers. I've already been in Wade Miller's ear about next year and how difficult it will be to top this year. Anyone who knows Wade knows what was going on behind the smile when he told me, "You just wait and see." So let's just hope the weather gods are as good to Winnipeg during next year's Grey Cup as the football gods were to the Bombers in helping them beat the Montreal Alouettes in the final game of the regular season to clinch the West Division. No one saw that game? It's pretty wild. Thought that one hit better. Transitioning to the CFLPA, thank you to Executive Director Peter Dykowski for being here. Thank you so much, as well as President Solomon Elamimian. The CFLPA's support is invaluable to the FRC and how we do our jobs. I applaud your efforts that you make to showcase the league's incredible talent on the field, but again, it's the initiatives off of it and your desire to get players involved in programs that will not only benefit their own lives, but also our communities as a whole, for why I have great respect for you and your association. I'd like to recognize now the newest inductees, Steve Daniel and Farhan Lalji. I actually met Steve for the first time today, which seems to be a common theme here. If I'm being totally honest, I thought Steve was made up of a bunch of ones and zeros, a sophisticated AI system that no matter what the degree of detail in your request, all you had to do was send it to Steve Daniel at the CFL, and you get back all these wonderful stats to enhance your story. Turns out Steve is actually real, so thanks, real Steve. I was trying to remember when I first got to know Farhan, and it has to be around 2016 because that's when I started covering the CFL on a full-time basis. I suggest that time frame, Farhan, because if there's anything I want to highlight about you beyond the incredible work that you do, there's absolutely no doubt about the incredible work you do. It's the incredible person that you are and how inviting you are to everybody. I know it. I know every time I get off the phone with you, I feel smarter, and better for it. And I've really appreciated not just having you as a colleague, but growing to be able to call you as a friend. So thank you so much. Congratulations, Farhan. Finally, I'd like to mention our former colleague and friend, longtime Winnipeg Sun sports editor, Ted Wyman. For those of you who didn't know Ted, he lost his battle with cancer last Saturday, just before the West Final, after being diagnosed the first week of training camp this year. For those of you who did know Ted, they know how wonderful a man he was, how missed he is this week. Ted loved covering sports more than anybody in this room, and I would argue combined, and particularly the CFL. I was personally blessed to be one of his best friends. In this industry, you don't control a lot. You don't control who you hang out with sometimes. You don't control a lot of different elements of this job. And I am so thankful that I was forced to hang out with Ted Wyman for as long as I did. And I'm better for it. I think anyone who's ever met Ted is better for it. And so I just wanted to raise my glass to Ted. It's just a kind of a final toast for my thing. To Ted Wyman, we miss you dearly. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, guys. Have a great cup.
Ted Wyman was a part of our pregame show on CJOB. He was so mad at me last year for voting for Zach Collaros to be the Bombers MOP when it was Brady Oliveira. The kind of conversations that only happen with people who are truly passionate about our game. He was wrong, but he was still. It's one of those ones that it leaves a massive hole in the Winnipeg media and the CFL media as well. I have a massive Excel database of reasons why Steve Daniel is the best. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'll ask Dave Naylor if he would come up and introduce our first inductee.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And it is a real honor for me to be able to introduce both of this morning's inductees, Steve Daniel and Farhan Lalji. And with Steve, it's funny. I have been covering the Canadian Football League since the early 1990s. And one of the things I recognized covering the league was that sometimes when it came to resources, statistical resources, historic resources, being able to tell stories and relate it to the past or put something in context, there was a bit of guesswork involved sometimes, and you couldn't actually get an answer to the questions you were looking for. And, at the time even, there was a gentleman named Greg Fulton, who I'm sure some people in this room remember. He's actually an inductee as a builder in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame in 1995. He passed away in 2002. And during the latter years of his life, I would hear people in the league office say, when Greg Fulton passes away, we're going to have a problem, because so much of the league's history was in Greg Fulton's head. Unfortunately, the other thing about Greg was he did the schedule every year, which is why the CFL schedule used to be released in May, but it now comes out much earlier. But with Greg's passing went so much of the history of the league. That was 2002. Steve Daniel began working with the league in 2005 and filled a massive void in terms of the league's current state and the league's history. You hear the jokes about all the calls to Steve Daniel. We've all made them. The emails. He's the most responsive man ever. Time zone. Be darned. On Monday afternoons, if I haven't got an idea for dropping back with Dave, I bust off a half-hour call to Steve, and by the time I'm done, I've got one. He is an invaluable resource to all of us. And if you haven't sent Steve an email and you haven't phoned him desperately on your deadline, I guarantee you've referenced his work in the documentation that we get from the Canadian Football League, the game quality and report, all those kinds of things. But the other thing I learned about Steve was during the pandemic. Those of us who cover the Canadian Football League full-time had some time on our hands during the pandemic occasionally. And one of the things I wanted to do was dive into the last time a pandemic shut down Canadian football, 1918, 1919, 1920, and see what I could learn from what the league did then and maybe draw some parallels or connections to the day. And that was when I learned that Steve Daniel isn't just a statistical guy. He is a historian. And the things he was able to explain to me about what the teams and the players and the league did in the late 19-teens was an eye-opener. And that's when I realized, I say, Steve just doesn't know the numbers. He knows the stories. He knows the history. Steve Daniel has a remarkable combination. He is a historian and a storyteller of the past, and somebody who's leading us into the future on the cutting edge as the director of analytics for the league. The game that we are also proud of right now that we see on the field is significantly a product of Steve's work and the direction that he gives to the Rules Committee and the Board of Governors and about where the game is at and where it needs to go. He has improved our game. He has improved the way we tell it. And I can think of no greater contribution someone could make to the Canadian Football League than that. Steve Daniel, please come up.
Thank you. I brought along 2 props, just so you know. At my table, there was a bunch of these. All of my family turned Farhan's face up and put mine face down.
Mine did the opposite.
I think they have had at times enough football, and I thank them for being here, and thank you all for being here. The other prop I brought is mandatory. It's what I plan on using today, an awful lot, to fix my mistakes. There's nothing like whiteout. So if I make a mistake on Solly's tackle or Tony Gabriel's historical stats or changing a Ben Cahoon stat, that's mandatory. The people that are here are so dear to me. I made a few notes, but I'll mess them up. I'll admit that. I'm part of a team, and I don't operate alone. And it might be my family team. It might be the team at the back, all of my friends, and it's not just me. So in my own view, I represent all of our staff. The connections that I have with TSN, all the work I've done to try to remove 10 of Glenn's interceptions from the historical record. It's 41 now, Glenn, not 51. Those things matter to me, and I'll tell you why. I have 2 themes in this, if you'll bear with me, and they are acceptance and belonging. When I was a kid, I went to a school called Vancouver College, and it was a crazy place. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fit in. I was always on the outside. And so my response was to try to beat them at everything. Out of that came a nickname that my boss likes to invoke about every Monday or so. What's that name, Greg? The Machine. And I thank those students at Vancouver College in my own way for my resolve. It was really just to try to be as good as I could be, and I failed an awful lot. I failed at UBC to begin with, but it taught me how to go about this job when presented this opportunity. how could you want for more to work with people in this room like this? And that's my theme, belonging in your group. How could you want for more than that? Just to be accepted by someone. I want to thank my brother, Brian, and my sister, Jeannie, Barb, and Jerry. My son, Paul, is here representing my other son, Mike. They have all supported me incredibly when my wife says, well, we've got to go out today, and here's what we have to do. And my response is, generally speaking, sorry, I can't go, I've got a game. And my wife puts up with that. More about her later. But belonging and accepting that my mother said, because she knew right away why the kids at Vancouver College used to pick on me so much. And I got over it. It took me a long time, but it's because she said to me one time, it's okay to be different. It's okay to be who you are and not what other people expect. My dad and I didn't get along very well for a long time. We figured it out later on, long time later. And so there was an article that came out in 2005 about the work I was doing, and the title of it was, Do Something with Your Life. I like to think it turned out okay, thanks to you. I mean, look at the group of people at the back of the room whom I work with every day, Eric and Ryan, Lawrence, Greg, Afram, Maurice, Lucas, Hack. What a group to belong to, and they accepted me too, or at least I'd like to think so. To the incredible talents of the FRC members in this room, just to be considered even close to being part of how good you really are I'm tagging along for the ride, and that has so much meaning to me. I think about it every night, and it matters so much to me. To Glenn, Rod, the other Rod from my past basketball, it's been 30 years of doing this. Farhan and I have known each other as great friends for 30 years, and I can't begin to tell you how important that is. There's two gentlemen I have a very special bond with. One of them is here. I believe the other couldn't quite make it off the flight, John Russin, but my friend, Dave Moyer. Stand up, Dave. Dave is the best at getting information to our fans. We work together so closely, and I love you, bro. To all the people in our team, like Lucas and I will talk every week, or OP and I will share something that has to be done. But there are two people in the stats world that really, really matter. And when it's my time to go, and hopefully not for a little bit yet, there's already somebody in place that's going to be even better than anything I've been able to do. And that man is Jeff Creever. Jeff and I are great friends first. And after that, great colleagues. Jeff has ideas I could never imagine. Between the two of us, each week, we do things that you never see, but you only see the product. I'll give you an example of the other guy is there, Doug Page. Doug has been in the league since 1986. Behind the scenes, you probably never met Doug. I have. For 20 years, we've done this together. I'll give you an example. We have a stats crew in every city, including Montreal. And the crew in Montreal today is really good. But in 2015, they weren't really good. And we were trying to fix it. And so about 5 minutes before game time, we get a call from the stats crew chief saying, oh, by the way, I won't be there. I'll be there, should be there about halftime. I'm walking up the hill to the stadium and just thought I'd let you know. Well, he had all the computers, all the stuff. We have nothing. We can't do the game. But Doug input the game and I called it off of TSN, your broadcast. And your broadcast saved that day. The guy arrived at halftime and we had a different stats crew chief, I think the next week. It's what I call the Dan Verhoeven effect. Those are things that never come to light. I do want to go back just a tiny bit and thank 2 or 3 other people that got me into this room. One of those people worked for the Portland Trailblazers. That's where I started in 1994. It's been 30 years. I worked for the Grizzlies for 10, moved to Memphis, came back, went to UBC. The historian thing that you mentioned, I'm an archaeologist. I work with Indigenous communities. We are on Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory, and I acknowledge that. Working with them taught me an awful lot about what they call OCAP, ownership, access, control, and permission. And the CFL gave me permission in 2006 to do what we've done. And Jeff is carrying on that legacy together with me. And in doing that, it's just been a pure act of love because it's not really work. One day, Doug and I and our crew were in the boardroom at BC Lions, and we were doing some games off-site, and somebody walked out their door and walked into the middle of the game and started debating sacks with me, Wally. And you probably forgot that, but it was fun because you were interested and you cared about what we were doing. And that level of care about what we've been doing really matters, and it shows, I think. And everyone in the room here, I think, cares about this game as much as I do, about as much as all of us do. I don't have that many more things to say, but as a teaching assistant at UBC, one of the things I've tried to teach the students I've been honored to instruct is that you don't just cover the curriculum. You cover the things that you want to dream about, that you think you can accomplish. How can you add when you join in? And that's the opportunity the CFL gave me. They told me 2 things when I joined. They said, take us wherever you want to go statistically. Your vision, that's what we'll do. But on one condition, the second thing was you got to tell us where you want to go. And I at least did one of those things. They have been so supportive. Back to Kevin McDonald and now my boss, Greg, our whole team. They just say, my voice counts. And back to that schoolyard thing at Vancouver College, it didn't count then. But to allow my voice to be heard makes all the difference in the world. I guarantee you. When you work behind the scenes and someone's listening, that's a pretty good reason to want to be here. I'll close with my final thoughts, and that is, there's this song. You may have heard it, you may not have. It's by a performer called Lauren Daig, and the song is called You Say, and it's really about what you believe in. And one of the lines, I'll read it, is, and this was hard, really hard to overcome. She says, at the start, I keep fighting voices in my head that say I'm not enough, that I will never measure up. But then at the end, she says, you say I am strong when I think I am weak. When I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours, the opposite. So I want to tell you who that you is in those 2 lines. And that you is sitting over there, and her name is Carol, and she is my wife and my best friend, and unfortunately, everybody else in the world's best friend. She's one of those people that just attracts friends. And she chose me. I don't know why, but my happiness in this world is based on everything she does. And there's no amount of support, love. It's unfathomable what I get in return just for showing up, for saying, sorry, I have a game. I owe her absolutely everything, as I do the people in this room. So I just want to close by saying, this is overwhelming to me, and it's just about the best thing you could ever have given me. And I thank you from here, and I thank every one of you.
We had to locate the plaque.
As any of you have been to this breakfast before know that sometimes there is an element of on the fly and having to audible. So I'm going to audible a little bit because in the great tradition of the breakfast, I screwed up the program. I want to ask Jeff Creever to come up and just say a few words before we present Steve with his plaque.
Thanks. I would echo a lot of what Dave Naylor said today, and I appreciate the FRC for giving me the opportunity to stand here. I'm incredibly honored to speak about Steve and the wonderful relationship we have, both as colleagues and friends. Many of us in this room have certainly reached out to Steve at various times, and he's helped us in so many ways. But not just that, he's making an impact on our game every day, which is awesome to see behind the scenes. And I can say with a lot of confidence that our game wouldn't be what it is without the great insight and analytics and everything that Steve's putting together. So for those I haven't met yet, Steve and I have been colleagues since 2019 when I transitioned to a role to stats from content. And really, we've established this close working relationship that's allowed us to put our heads together and continue to think about what CFL stats can and should look like, both now and in the future. And building on the foundation that Steve has really built throughout many years of hard work, and a lot of that on his own. Before we started working together, Steve probably knew me for my persistent and, let's be honest, sometimes probably annoying emails and requests while I was editing for CFL.ca. And the first time I really started to get to know Steve was when I visited Vancouver in 2019. I was taking on this new role, and I wanted to see a day in the life of Steve Daniel. That trip was a real eye-opener, getting to spend time with Steve, meeting his wonderful wife, Carol, and seeing the beautiful home that they've built in Ladner. But I also got a first-hand look at Steve and the meticulous dedication to his craft. I got to spend time with the stats crew at a BC Lions home game. We worked a doubleheader together from Steve's office. But I'll never forget getting on the bus from Ladner to go back to BC and shaking my head and thinking, what the heck have I gotten myself into here? I think I came to Vancouver with a long list of questions. I left with a lot more than I showed up with. But in the months and years that followed, with Steve's help, I learned the nuances pretty quickly. And those that know Steve understand he can be a little particular about even the smallest of details, which is what makes Steve so great. But he's always kept an open mind with me, and I'm very thankful for that. We often put our heads together and think of ways we can improve our approach, and we still do that today alongside our colleague, Doug Page, who, by the way, has the final call on tackles and knockdowns. So if there are any linebackers in here, it's that guy over there. We'll give you his home address if you want to send him something. But when I first took the stats role, it was to be Steve's successor. And Steve, I'm so glad you decided to stay because our work together has been so incredibly rewarding. We've watched our roles expand and evolve, absent of any ego, with a singular focus on our deep commitment to the league and what matters most to us. So when I think of the Hall of Fame, Steve, you're such an obvious choice. You took on the task of building the league stats department from the ground up, but you didn't just step into a role. You created something that never existed. It just, like Dave said perfectly, it wasn't there, and you built it from the ground up through hours of poring over old game tapes or digging through game books, sometimes faded ink and messy handwriting, just to make sure everything added up properly, or as we call it, being in balance. Steve, when people think about CFL stats, they think of you. Your legacy is woven into the very fabric of our league for future generations to build on. So on behalf of us, on behalf of all of us, thank you for everything that you've done, and congratulations on this special honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, 2024 CFL Media Wing inductee, Steve Daniel.
Congratulations, Steve. I'm told there are 620 people watching this online, which is fantastic. And I want to say to each of you, for only $5 to the Football Reporters of Canada, I will do the rest of the program topless. $50, I'll put my shirt back on. So we're going to do some good fundraising here tonight. I'd love to call back Dave Naylor once again. I'm hoping there's a video tribute to my friend Farhan Lalji, and please let it involve glasses Farhan from the Western Broadcast Center of Sports Desk, where I first got to know and love his face when he would call me and go, "Take that out of my highlight pack. What are you doing to me? You can't." I love it. I love it. Dave Naylor, if you'd come back to honor our friend Farhan Lalji.
Thank you very much. Wow. When I was asked to introduce Farhan, it was really almost overwhelming because he's had such an impact on my career, my life. He affectionately calls me his work wife. I call him the same thing, and I'm very lucky that way. There are no shortage of reasons to put Farhan Lalji in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. He is, whether it is his quality as a broadcaster, his qualities as a reporter, or his never-ending passion for Canadian football. But there's also one other reason to put him in the Hall of Fame, particularly this year. And that is, I promise you, this is the only way we could get Farhan to an 8 a.m. breakfast on Grey Cup Sunday. During my career, when I worked at the Globe and Mail, I had a working relationship with a guy named Al Mackey, who is familiar to a lot of you in this room. He is a Hall of Fame inductee in the media wing as well. And it was this seamless relationship where I was kind of the Football East guy. He was the final Football West guy. We'd talk first thing in the morning. We'd text the night before. We'd talk 4 or 5 times during the day, and we'd stitch it all together. And it was never ego. It was always about product. And I thought to myself when I left the Globe, I will never have another relationship like that work-wise in my life. That was a once-in-a-career thing. And it was one of the hardest things for me about leaving the Globe and coming to TSN. And I am so lucky that I've had 2 of those relationships in my career. Which is just, I'm really at a loss for words to talk about what a joy that makes my job. Because when I'm off the mark, Farhan will say, no. And sometimes he's off the mark and I'll say, oh, come on, man. And at the end of the day, it goes all day. We talk in the morning, we talk at noon. That is the relationship we have. I've always thought of Farhan, even before I knew him, as the face of West Coast sports in Canada. And I got to say, it's pretty amazing to be the face of West Coast anything in Canada when you don't like cannabis, sushi, or coffee. What do you mean you're a Vancouver guy? Farhan, I haven't done my research on this one, and maybe I should check with Steve on the stats, but I believe Farhan is going to be the first inductee to the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, any wing, who was born in Tanzania. And I do think that's significant. I think if our league and our game are going to endure and thrive, it has to be appealing to people whose grandfathers didn't watch it. And I think Farhan very much represents that today. Farhan has never made a secret. At TSN, he has 2 primary roles, covering the Canucks and covering the Canadian Football League and covering football in general. He has never made a secret of which one he likes more. And in fact, if the Vancouver Canucks ever get to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final again in this market, and the Lions have a preseason game that night, you might find Farhan at BC Place. Stacey, roll tape.
Simon is just 32 and appears to be showing no signs of slowing down, saying he'd like to play another 6 seasons. The past 5 seasons were as dominant a stretch as the CFL has ever seen.
With 175 yards of offense in his first game at the new BC.
In most weeks, Harris would have been a slam dunk as the league's top Canadian.
We're with Gene and Farhan. Gene, first of all, what brings you to Vancouver this time around?
You hear that sound? That's the sound of Crown Vancouver. Let me fix you up here.
I like that. I needed that.
What's happening here? We're having such a great time. Oh!
He's watching him jump. He's into the game.
That's not for me. That's not for our family. Oh my God!
Now, this is the first CFL game that Gene has ever seen.
Back again with the panel, Bill, Davis, and Enoch. And guys, for the last couple of seasons, we've been talking about the window in Winnipeg and whether or not it remains open. They've got 8 new starters in tonight's game, a couple of guys because of injuries. So, is the window still open, though?
It's open, but it's not like that.
What's happening this year is nothing new. Over the past 3 seasons, the Lions have gone just 3-9 in the first month. They spend the rest of the year trying to make up lost ground.
Well, we'll get to the game in a moment, but what if the halftime tribute, just everything that's gone on with your final game here mean to you?
Well, you know what? It's been very, very special, and you know, it's been an exciting time for myself and my family, and obviously to get, you know, this kind of love and acknowledgement says a lot about, you know, our fans and the people of British Columbia.
It's that play fake for looking, has a wide open. Keon Hatcher at the 50, at the 40. Hatcher crosses the 35, and a big play, the biggest of the night for the Lions offense.
Now with his take on his counterpart, Brock Purdy, here's Farhan Lalji.
Dave, there's been so much talk this week about Brock Purdy as a game manager, but if you look at the numbers surrounding yards per attempt and big play dependency, it might actually be Patrick Mahomes who's become a bit of a game manager, while Purdy is turning into a gunslinger. Over 100 yards for you, almost 200 for your team. Just talk about this balanced, dominant offensive performance.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, you know, having Trey back there definitely is beautiful. You can't pull the ball, you know, and run. They got to stay true to Trey, you know, actually being a run threat.
I set some goals and we managed to achieve them. So I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to play behind this offensive line.
Thanks, John. Congratulations. Thank you. That's John Cornish, only the 3rd Canadian ever to win the CFL MLB, first in 35 years. Let's have that sports center.
On orange shirt night here in Vancouver, the team in orange and the team in white blend. They're at opposite ends of the CFL standings as far as playoffs are concerned. But we've got 2 receivers, one on each team, Dominic Rhymes and Jalen Ackland, who are at the top of the receiver standings. 2 exciting names to keep an eye on.
Farhan Lalji, TSN. Farhan Lalji, TSN, Vancouver.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 2024 Canadian Football Hall of Fame Media Meeting inductee, Farhan Lalji.
There you go. Make sure that doesn't fall down. Thank you very much, Dave, my work wife. Amazing. Look at that video, just seeing the change in weight, change in hair, all of those things. But I do want to thank some people before I kind of get my speech started. My gift to all of you is I guarantee to go less than Paul Graham did. Remember Mike Beamish 10 years ago? That took a while. We won't do that. But I do want to thank some people before I forget. First of all, is Dave. The relationship he talks about is felt both ways. Dave and I talk constantly. It's a completely symbiotic relationship. We work in this silo with Troy White here and Jamie Rydell, who's at the stadium right now, and it's such a great working relationship and working environment that it's worth its weight in gold. Which, Kenny, you can't use that against me when we want to negotiate a raise, but it's a great thing. Dave and I. If you're talking to one, you're talking to the other. I think the only difference between Dave and I right now is hair, and one of us doesn't smoke weed. But if Bell ever cut Dave, I might start. The other person I want to thank is my wife, who's amazing. And, you know, Steve, I echo a lot of the same things. I know that for me, I couldn't do what I do without my wife. Both from the coaching side and the broadcast side, because when I go somewhere, she holds down the fort, she makes it easy. When I coached, she made a lot of sacrifices, and you know, she's my partner in all of it, so it doesn't work without her. And you know, the best part is that she loves everything about my involvement in football, except the football part. Right? So the actual details of the game, not so much. And then when I'm watching the games at home, you can tell she's like, when is this going to end? And I look at her and say, honey, it's for work. And there's not much she can say at that point. But she's been so supportive, and I look forward to spending every day with her. Other people that I want to thank are people at TSN, including Paul Graham. Earlier this year, at the start of the year, we do this event in Toronto, which is kind of a kickoff, and when we did the PowerPoint, my name was listed in 4 or 5 different categories, and I thank Paul for giving me the opportunity to do all of that and to really expand my career. There's so much about this game and this league that I love, and I get to touch all of it, right? From doing the insider stuff to reporting to play-by-play to all of it, and without Paul, those things aren't possible. So thank you. TSN has been blessed to have you, and you've been a tremendous leader to all of us, and I wish you all the best in your retirement. To Kenny Volden, Kenny is, took me a long way in SportsCenter. Was one of the first guys when I got there. We used to be on the assignment desk and produce early shows and things like that. And we were talking to Christy Jordan last night or a couple of nights ago, and he said, "I raised this guy," and he did. And Kenny has given me some really sage, simple, prescient advice. The first day I went on air, and he says the same thing to this day.
Don't fuck it up. It's pretty good. It's right to the point. You can't get that wrong. To others like Sean Redmond and Stu Johnson and guys that really fight the good fight so that we can have the resources that we need to continue to do the work we do. I thank you for your commitment to news, to programming, to events, to all of it. So thank you for everything you allow TSN to do and become. To John Hines and Chris Edwards and Mike Marshall, who isn't here, and Paul McLean, who was here when I started, thanks for listening to me, because I know you turn the volume down. Because I'm nattering at these guys, right? I get 3 hits a game, plus a couple halftime interviews, and it's not enough because I love the game so much, right? So I'm always saying something to them, which they already know because they're so good at this, and they're Hall of Famers in their own right. John got inducted last year. Eddie's going to go in soon, but I know that they put up with my act, and I appreciate everything you do because the games are so good, and the reason they're as good as they are is because of the work you guys do and the commitment you show. To the FRC and their commitment. People talk about homers in journalism, right? Derek Taylor's a Winnipeg homer. No, he's not. Jeff Hamilton's a Winnipeg. No, he's not. All of us are homers for the Canadian Football League, right? We love this league, and we want it to succeed. And even when we're critical, it's from a place of love because we want it to succeed. And that's the one unique thing about this game, because when you go cover the other leagues, it's about their jobs. It's about other things. When we cover this league, we love this league. And we put a little more into it, and we defend it. And it's a good group of people to be around, right? I mean, the guys at 3 Down are the same way. They love the league. They commit to it. It's a good group of people because we're biased. We're biased for Canadian football, right? And with that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I won't start at age 3 like PG did. I'll start at age 4. So that'll take a lot less time. Yes, actually, before I get to 4, yesterday I was at my son's high school football game in Ferndale. Friday night, I was at my old high school team that I coached, their high school, the playoff game in Abbotsford. On my way there, I got a text from a friend who said, "Hey, we could get an upset here at Cloverdale at Cap. Tweedsmuir and Graham are playing." I turned. I was right at 176th exit. I turned and went to Cap to watch the second half of a high school football game. Thursday, I was at a junior varsity playoff game in North Vancouver because I had a couple of hours to spare between early activities and late activities here. Are you sensing a theme? I love football. Like, I love it. And I feel like Peyton Manning today. And I say that because I got a chance to cover Peyton's retirement in Denver. And that was the theme of his speech. I love football. Thank you, football. It's given me so much in my life. And I always wondered where it came from. And I kind of, a few years ago, realized that it actually started soon after we moved from Africa. I moved from Tanzania to British Columbia when I was 4. And when you're an Ismaili Muslim kid growing up, there's no Christmas. Okay, so back, like today, we get to say season's greetings. When I was a little kid, it was Merry Christmas. And so when I was in elementary school, I did Christmas arts and crafts. I learned Christmas carols. I took a lead role in the Christmas play, and on December 25th, I got a lump of coal. And that's funny, because my life is good. I don't look back with any level of sadness. But my Christmas day was watching 2 college football all-star games. I watched the Kelly Blue-Gray Classic from Alabama, and I watched the Hula Bowl from Hawaii, because both those games were on Christmas Day. And that's when the love affair for football began. And it continued. And Randy Ambrosie, when he first got the job, one of the things Randy said to me was, we have to get kids when they're in that 10 to 12 window, because that's when their good old days begin. And that's where their love for a sport begins. And you know, those are your memories. And sure enough, Jerry Taggy and the Cardiac Kids, and Leon Bright, and Larry Key, and Joe Fourqueen. And I loved those guys. And it actually started for me in 1978, watching a college football game, the Rose Bowl. A guy named Warren Moon was the quarterback for the University of Washington. And I fell in love with all of it, the pageantry, the colors, the bands, and the game, and these gladiators. And, it never changed. 1982, we finally beat those bastards from Edmonton. Mervyn Fernandez, on a beautiful sunny afternoon at Empire Stadium, ran a kick back to clinch the victory. It was awesome. Back in those days, I know that you talked about the Knothole Gang in Edmonton. We had the Nally's potato chip section here in BC. You got a Nally's potato chip bag, you ate it, you took it to the game, and I think it was $1 or $2. Suits, how much was it?
Like 50 cents.
Yeah, it's like nothing. You give them the bag, you give them this, and you get to sit in the end zone, and you get to watch the game. And there were lots of people that brought footballs. We'd be throwing the footballs around, and I loved it so much. I would literally take the bus an hour and a half to go watch these games. My dad would take me to some games when I was younger, but I wanted to go all the time. And, he was busy, he didn't have time. So I actually would take the bus when I was 11 years old, and we would stop at Kootenay Loop on Hastings. We would walk down, and when the game ended, there was just hundreds of buses, because everybody poured out, got into a bus, and went back to their houses. And those are great memories. And then in 1983, the Lions moved into BC Place Stadium. So cool. No more Nally section, but we had Mohawk tickets, right? So I would make my dad go to Mohawk and fill up gas there on the Monday. It had to be the Monday because they'd run out of tickets. So he would go on Monday, he would fill up gas at Mohawk so I could get tickets to go to the game. And I went to every game in 1983, except the Grey Cup. And before the Western Final, I actually took part in a Crazy George act-alike contest. So LG 73 Radio had this thing, you go down there and you want to act like a lunatic. So I went there and I took a drum and I put on like a bald wig. In hindsight, I looked more like Daryl Davis than I did Crazy George. And so we went there and I won. I won the Crazy George Act-alike contest. I got a pair of tickets to the West Final. And I got a pair of Nike turf shoes, which I got to wear during my high school football times. And I couldn't get tickets to the Grey Cup. So I watched at home. And I have a picture of myself in a Lions t-shirt, Lions ball cap, Lions foam finger, with a ball under my arm in tears because the hated Argos beat us at the end. And Jacques Chapdelaine dropped the pass to win the game. Never forgive him. Condredge Holloway, Bob Obilovich, Joe Barnes. Barnes came on in relief in the second half, and they took it. They took it from us. 1984 rolled around, and I got to play high school football. So in 1984, we were living in Burnaby South's catchment area, and Burnaby Central was starting a football program. I wanted to play football. I wanted to play high school football. So we had to transfer. So I had to write a letter. So I wrote a letter, but I had to make my dad transcribe it because I didn't, my handwriting looked like a kid. So my dad transcribed it. We made an appeal to the school board, and they let me transfer into Burnaby Central. And that changed my life. So, and I met one of my mentors, my head high school coach, Alex Reed, and, just a great, great man who I still stay in touch with to this day. And so I go through all the off-season training. I go through spring ball. We get to fall camp. And all of a sudden, when school starts, some really unsavory guys started showing up to football practice. Guys that wound up in the smoke pit and things like that, and people I just didn't want to be around. So I decided I wasn't going to play. And I went home, and I said to my mom, I'm going to quit football. I don't want to play. And she looked at me, and she's like, you've tried so hard at this. Why would you quit? So she convinced me to go back. So Mom, thanks so much for that, because without that, none of this happens. So I went back on the Monday, and I walked into my head coach's office, and I thought he was just going to crucify me and not let me play. And he looked at me and said, yeah, you're about a day earlier than I thought you'd be. Go get your gear. And he let me come back and he let me play. And that was, it meant so much to me, just all of it, because, it changed my life. And, and my parents' involvement in that, it was so important. My mom still to this day has no idea of anything about football, hey? So in our language, we have this term called Dougla. And Dougla basically means dog pile, right? To jump on top of each other. So my mom's version of football is there's 2 meetings. They go make 2 lines. One guy yells numbers. They do Dougla and go back to their meetings. And really, you can't really argue with that, right? And my dad, who back then wasn't really into sports, it took a lot for us to move from Africa to here and a lot of sacrifice, and he was really busy working and providing. And now he's the biggest supporter I have. He watches everything. Games I don't watch, he watches. And it hit me one time. I was in Jacksonville covering the Jags training camp a couple of years ago, and he called me and he's like, Farhan, how is Nathan Rourke doing in Jaguars? So their influence and support has meant everything. And my sister, who's not here, she's got some health issues. She's basically my PR agent. Anytime there's an article or a picture or this, she posts all of it. And the way she's handled her condition with the grace that she has, she's totally my hero. 1985, Lions win the Grey Cup, which was a cool event here in British Columbia. 1986. I graduated high school, and then in '87 I began coaching while I was also playing junior football with the Vancouver Marilomas. And I couldn't, I had to do a year of Douglas College, and I just knew I wanted to go to university. I had no idea what I wanted to be. And so 1988 I started at Simon Fraser, and one day I'm walking through the academic quadrangle, and I go to the student employment area. And I see this posting for this sports information director job. And I'm thinking, oh, that looks like a pretty cool deal, right? I get to be around sports. I get to, tell stories and numbers. And back then, that job used to come with an internship at Labatt's. So you could spend the summer working at Labatt's. So I thought, okay, well, what I'm going to do for the next few years is I'm going to build my resume while I'm going to school so that I can one day get that job. And I decided to major in communications. I had no thoughts of becoming a broadcaster at that point. So one of the things I did as a volunteer is I was the sports director at SFU Campus Radio, CJIV. So I go to my first BC Lions press conference in 1988. Matt Dunnigan had been traded to the Lions. And the prologue to that story was one day I'm on a bus, I'm on the SkyTrain, and all of a sudden there's this buzz, and a newspaper boy literally got on the SkyTrain and dropped some newspapers on one of the cars. And on the front page was Matt Dunnigan has been traded to the BC Lions. And the Sun and the Province were both morning papers back then. The Sun held its final edition.
Put Matt Dunnigan being traded to BC on the front.
Because that was a huge deal. And then a couple of months later, I go to a Lions press availability. And back then, those were a big deal, right? So Larry Donovan was the Lions coach. He'd replaced Don Matthews the previous year. Joe Glatt fired Matthews, put in Montana's Larry Donovan. And I go there, and there's all of these reporters that are titans in our industry and in our market. Jim Taylor, Steve Armitage, Anna Stukas was there. I remember sitting in a seat, and J.P. McConnell looks at me and says, because that was Stu's seat. So I had to move to a different seat. All these guys are there, and I'm waiting. Everybody's asking questions, and I think at the end, I'm like, the Lions had signed Ricky Foggy that year. Everybody remember Ricky Foggy? So I'd watched him play college football because I'm a big college junkie. I watched him play at the University of Minnesota, and I thought, okay, maybe I can be smart and pretend like I know something about this guy. So I asked him about Ricky Foggy, and Larry Donovan says to me, well, we'd like Rick to come into the game in the second quarter. We'd like him to drive us down the field and lead us to a touchdown, and then we'll put Matt back in the game. And I thought, well, that sounds easy, right? And thus began a lifetime of listening to cliches from coaches and athletes and all of that. But, I was around all of these people, and I thought, wow, who are these guys? I can't believe I'm next to them. 1991, I finally get the sports information job at Simon Fraser. And one of the first things, early in my first year, we decided to transition from paper stats to a computer stats program. And so we're going through this. We decided we're going to go with this program called Statman, and I buy a laptop and we load this program in, and we figure it out. And football season goes okay. And during the early part of football season, I get a call from John Black, the legendary PR man for the Los Angeles Lakers. And as much as I talk about the Lions and the CFL, my favorite athlete growing up was Magic Johnson, right? So he says to me, we are coming to Vancouver for an NBA preseason game. Do you have a stats crew that works at your university games that could help us? Yeah, of course. Because that means I get to sit at the stats table literally 10 feet from Magic Johnson because he's going to come in and check in to go. And so I thought, yeah. We had never done a basketball game on this computer program. And in my mind, it was a good idea to use an NBA game as a test run to get my stats crew ready for the college basketball season. What a disaster. Kind of like a professional football league we know and love from last year. Yeah, that's a slow build. I know that was going to take a sec. Heinze knows. Come on, guys, lighten up back there. We love you. We knew it was going to take time. So John Black eventually, during the game, winds up doing stats by hand because he comes over at halftime, and we had no idea. And thus, when the Grizzlies came along, they weren't going to come to me. They went right to Steve Daniel. And, and Steve and I, it's such an honor for me to go into this hall this year with Steve because we literally spent 250 nights at Grizzlies games, a lot of losses, 20 feet from each other at that scorer's table. We got to know each other really well, found ways to spin a yarn about a bad basketball team. But those were great times. 1994, I got my first media job. David Pratt, former TSN's David Pratt, I used to call him all the time begging him to do stories on SFU athletes. And he said to me that if you can be as big a pain in the ass for me producing my radio show as you were in this job, I think I'm on to something. So he hired me. And so my job was to produce the show and to also do sports updates during commercials. And that year, 1994, what a time to be alive. The Canucks go to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. And the Lions win the Grey Cup. And so during the Canuck playoff run, all of our fill-in hosts travel. So now it comes down to me that one of these days we couldn't get a fill-in host and I had to host and do the whole show. And, oh, wow. Like it's during the Canucks playoff run and I decided I had to change the lineup of the show to include more football, just so I could be in my wheelhouse, right? And so about half the show was hockey and half the show was football. So we did that. And during that run, I got to meet Rod Smith. We spent a lot of nights at the Shark Club together, didn't we? You remember a couple. When the Leafs and Canucks played in the semifinal or in the conference final, they bring in the big guns. So Rod was still a reporter at that time, so he came in. We got to know each other. Then the 1995 was the first time I got a television job because the radio show lasted about 9 months. The station made a format change. So 95, I got a job at CBC Radio. You want to talk about a diversity hire, okay? 1995. Barry McDonald, one of my mentors in broadcasting, goes from CBC back to Sports Page. So they elevate Karen Larson to his role, and he's like, look, I think we can get you this job. So I sat down with his executive producer, and she tells me she wants to hire me to be the weekend news anchor. News? Me? I'd never read a teleprompter. And so they hired me to anchor the weekend news, and the first time I read a teleprompter was after I'd been hired. And they wanted somebody who could produce and write the sports. Their newsroom would produce and write the news and weather, but someone had to read the whole thing. So I did that for 2 years. And that was a lot of fun. And then after that, or during that time, Jeff Reinbold and Joe Paopao take over the Lions, right, on the coaching staff. So 1996, I go to, Jeff and I became good friends, and I went to their office. And Jeff and I were going for beers, and so he went to the bathroom. I'm sitting at his desk, and I look, and he's got a resume. And I'm debating at this time, do I want to get into television or broadcasting, or do I want to get into coaching? Because that was my other thing. I'd been coaching since 1987. I'd gone down and coached at a number of Division I camps, and I thought at the time, maybe that's the way I want to go, right? Maybe I want to become a career coach. So I look in that moment, that was my watershed moment. Jeff had a resume on his desk, and I looked at his resume, and he had been to like 8 different piece of crap little old towns in 10 years. And I looked at that and I thought, I don't want that life for a family I don't even have yet. So at that point I decided, let's just stick with this broadcasting thing for a while. And in 1997 I got hired by TSN. And Mike Day was our boss at the time, and Ken was heavily involved, and it's been an amazing ride for me since that time, and I've had a chance to cover some of the biggest events in sports. I've had a chance to have some great CFL moments. The 2004 Grey Cup was incredible. Wally, you still made the right decision by starting Dickey over Casey Printers. I'll tell you that right now. I was on the sidelines for the 13th man. I was on the sidelines for the 13th man on Saskatchewan sideline when that happened. 21 Grey Cups, the 94 one, of course, being the first because I got to cover that as a broadcaster for the first time. Watching Solly and Biggie and G-Roy and Travis Luley and Wally win that 2011 Grey Cup and, that remarkable comeback after the way they started the season. But through it all, this is an awesome league. And everybody needs to know that. I've said before that it's unfortunate that they get paid 5 to 10% as much as the other league because they are 95% as good. And as a guy that has been on the field at kickoff for a Super Bowl, when the ball is about to get kicked off, when the anthem has happened, when the F-16s fly overhead, and when that ball gets kicked and all those flashes are happening, there is no difference. There is none. And if you give me the choice on who to cover, these are the people I want to cover because they appreciate it. They want to be covered. They're professional athletes and they want to tell their stories as opposed to other people who take it for granted. These guys want to be covered, and it's brought so many incredible people into my life, including a guy like Wally. I used to go into his office and he didn't just, be the coach while I was the reporter. He mentored me as a coach because he knew I coached. He mentored me as a dad. I remember one day in 2017, Jonathan Jennings, he had the great year the year before in 16. And in 17, he got hurt early. He had the shoulder injury. And he's due to be on the 6th game, and about week 4, he's ready to play again. And I go to Wally, and I say to him in the post-press conference, I said, "Are you sure this guy's ready? Like, why would you do this?" And he says, "Come to my office." No. Come to my office. So I went to his office, I sat down, and he showed me a play of Jennings throwing a corner out to Manny Arsenault. It was a 40 yards in the air rope to the field side, and he didn't even step into it. And he looked at me, he's like, "Do you think he's ready?" And I said, "Can't argue with that." And I thought to myself, I'd love to tell that in the game. "Wally, can I have that video?" Calls his video guy, give him the video. Who would do that right now in this league, right? And they need to know that. And Wally always told me that when he came to BC, he understood that his job was not just to win football games, it was to sell tickets, right? And that, he was the greatest coach in league history, more wins than anybody else, but he understood his job and was still able to win despite that, because what we do is not evil, right? What we do really helps this league. So with that, I promised that I would be under PG's time. Am I still under PG's time? Anyone keeping track? I'm close, right? So again, thank you to everybody. Thank you to my family for being here. And let's have a great, great football game. And remember, we all love football.
Hey everybody, Derek had to sneak away. He's that seems to be the theme of things. Everyone's in a bit of a rush today. What an incredible career, Farhan. Thanks so much. 1986, what a year, graduate year for you, my birth year. I wouldn't be laughing, Dave Naylor. I believe you spoke at my grade 8 class for journalism. Just kidding. It was Carleton, and I was an older student, so it wasn't that long ago. Teleprompter. That first look, I actually got my first taste of a teleprompter about a year ago when they asked me to do a 30-part series, true crime series for Super Channel that I got not only the main role in, but it aired last week. So if you guys are checking out true crime series called Finally Caught, so that's a shameless plug for me. Last thing, just to let you guys, the FRC members and people at the Holiday Inn, we have just the buses. The buses are leaving. First one's at 11:30, I believe, and the last one being 2. And then on the way home, buses start at 7:30 and the last one's at 10:30. So I know everyone's got to get going. Thank you so much for showing up here. Thank you so much for the inductees. Unless, Paul, you had something to say? Did you want to say a final word at all? I think Paul's I think Paul's taking his licks. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here. Everybody, thanks so much. Have a great football game.
Right by the